Thank you and good morning everybody. A very warm welcome to this joint meeting of Dumfries and Galloway Council partners and our Youth Council. I'd like to welcome our Youth Councillors supported by Regan, who's not yet had her baby or on maternity leave. I think you're probably counting down your meetings now, aren't you? And obviously the Youth Work team and also a number of new board members, so we'll go through them. So we have Marsala Craig, who's online, I believe. Yep. She's the interim vice chair of NHS Dumfries and Galloway and is replacing Nick Ross. We have Derek Heaton, who replaces Andrew Canna as the local senior officer for Dumfries and Galloway Division of Scottish Fire and Rescue. And I'll just mute my laptop. We have Alex Lamb. Very warm welcome to Alex. She's the managing director of Wheatley Homes South and is replacing Alan Glasgow. Valerie White, our Director of Public Health, is the advisor representing the Community Planning Senior Leadership in her capacity as Chair. Welcome, Valerie. And Claire Renton, Place Director, who is attending her first meeting as our Scottish Government Observer and replaces Colin Cook. Could I remind board members that we're being live streamed today to allow for public access, and also that the meeting is being recorded and will be available for subsequent viewing online. Stephen, could I ask you to provide the Sedrenton apologies?
Thanks, Chair. Apologies from Joanna Campbell and the substitute is Karen Hunter. For SOS, apologies from Russell Griggs and Jane Morrison-Rose, and the substitute is Rob Davidson. Apologies from Shona Mitchell, no substitute available today, and also Stephen Meikle, unfortunately no substitute available today either, but will be available for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Our first item on the agenda is the draft minute of the last meeting for approval. Are members happy to approve the minute as an accurate record? Yeah. No comments? Good. Okay, moving on to item 2, Community Planning Action Log. Stephen, I'll speak to this report.
Thank you. Everything's really on track in the action log. The only one really to bring to your attention is number 4, discussions around poverty and partner work around that. And there was an initial discussion at the leadership team at the end of August, and that's going to be followed up at the meeting at the end of September. So it's on track at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment on item 2? No. With that, we'll move on to item 3, most important part. Our youth councillors will now deliver a short presentation on their priority issues, and then we'll open up for questions. So I'm handing over to you, Riley. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Riley True, and alongside me doing this presentation, we have Max and Louise. And we're going to give you a short presentation about the work of Dumfries and Galloway Youth Council. For those that don't know, the Youth Council was established in 2019, and we are the region's elected voice of young people aged 12 to 25 who live, work and study in the area. There are 3 types of role on the Youth Council. We have nominated youth councillors who are elected to represent the views and opinions of young people who identify with a minority group, i.e. LGBT youth, young carers and care experienced young people. We also have ward youth councillors who are elected to represent people who live, work or study in their ward area. And we also have members of the Scottish Youth Parliament, also known as MSYPs, who are elected to represent the views of young people across their constituency to the national decision makers. We are now in our 3rd term of membership for the Youth Council, with our most recent election happening in November last year. Our term is due to end November next year. We are a youth-led organisation and have a leadership group made up of 8 people. Max, who represents Wigtonshire Locality Youth Councillors. Val, who represents Stewartry Locality Youth Councillors. Lucy, who represents Nithsdale Locality Youth Councillors. Lydia, who represents Annandale and Eskdale Locality Youth Councillors. Tom, who represents nominated youth councillors. And Louise, who represents MSYPs. Elsa is the chairperson, and I am also the vice chairperson of the organisation.
We are proud to have a membership made up of young people across from Dumfries and Galloway from a wide range of backgrounds. There are currently 29 members of the Youth Council who are aged from 13 to 25-year-old. There are Youth Council members attending 14 of the 16 secondary schools in Dumfries and Galloway and members who attend college and university. It is important to us that the Youth Council can speak up for young people regardless of where they live, if they are studying or not, and what age they are.
We're an organisation that's supported by the Council's Youth Work Service. In November 2022, a new youth participation and engagement strategy was approved, which outlines the Council's approach to youth democracy from 2022 to 2027. Within that, there is a commitment to the organisation to ensure young people have the skills, ability and confidence to speak out, talk with, listen to and value young people, make sure that young people have opportunities and are given the choice to actively and meaningfully get involved in decisions that affect their lives. Active views of young people by reviewing and changing services as required. As part of that, we're meeting once per year with the Council and once per year with the Community Planning Partnership. Members of the Youth Council volunteer 3 hours per week, meeting 3 times per month over the summer, and at the moment we are running a postcard consultation in our local communities and online to find out the practical things that young people feel that could be done differently in their area. Our role isn't about being the only voice for young people. It's about campaigning the views of young people and working with organisations to make sure that young people are meaningfully included in decision making.
Since the elections, there's been a lot to do, learn and figure out. Between December to February, the Youth Council was focused on our orientation and training, getting to know each other and what our roles involved. In February, we participated in the joint meeting with Dumfries and Galloway Council that has seen an action plan developed based on the 5 themes within 10,000 voices. In March, we took part in the annual Youth Council residential and held leadership elections for the year ahead. We carried out a short-term consultation with young people on the initial proposal for an asymmetric week for school students. We scored applications and award funding through the Summer of Play. This was a quieter time as most members were going through exams during May and June. And since August, our postcard consultation is live and will close in October. Our MSYPs are also consulting on the Scottish Youth Parliament Manifesto that will decide key policy areas for the next 5 years. We are focused on finding out what young people think and what want to see change to make their communities better for young people throughout DNG.
Across the region, there are 4 things that have been highlighted that aren't specific to one organisation and are general policies amongst the top 5 issues identified within 10,000 voices. 1. Involving young people in decision making and children's rights. 2. Mental health and well-being. 3. Climate change and environmental action. 4. Equalities, awareness and accessibility. Today is the 4th joint meeting with the Community Planning Partnership. The first meeting took back in 2022, where we attended the meeting to give a presentation about the aims and the purposes of Youth Council, which led to the Youth Council facilitating a workshop at the 3rd Sector Dumfries and Galloway Children, Young People and Power Conference. In 2022, for the second meeting, we participated in a workshop focused on suicide prevention strategies for Dumfries and Galloway. And in 2023, for the 3rd meeting, we took part in 3 workshops discussing topics affecting young people throughout the region that are relevant to community planning partners. The joint meeting between the Community Planning Partnership and the Youth Council are not about committing individual organisations to undertake actions.
Our focus for today's meeting is on children's rights, and we thought it would make it worthwhile explaining what our role has been in developing the Children's Rights Report and Action Plan for Dumfries and Galloway over the last year. In 2023, 4 Youth Council members were involved in the Member Officer Working Group on behalf of the wider organisation. Our main priority was ensuring that young people and children throughout the region had the opportunity to shape the report and its actions. We put together a workshop that adults ran with 771 children and young people who took part in over 4 weeks. Their views were used to direct the report and agree actions that would improve young people's knowledge and understanding of their rights over the next 3 years. We believe that children's rights isn't something that can be looked at on its own, and that it makes a big difference when young people know their rights and what they mean for them in their everyday lives. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, all of you, and thank you very much for your commitment to the Youth Council and the work that you do there, because I know it's not easy balancing that alongside your studies and other work and having some fun actually in life as well. So that was very much appreciated and just gave us a wee canter of what you've been up to and what you're planning, and hopefully your contributions today will really help us to mould what we need to be doing for you as well. So I'm very happy to open it up to members for any questions or comment. I've got Marsala online. Morning, Marsala.
Morning, Gail. Thank you very much. Really interesting presentation. Thank you to members of the Youth Council for that. With my NHS chair hat on, I'd love to pick up a conversation with them about the climate change and environmental action piece. I also chair our Net Zero Programme Board, and I think what we're crying out for is the voice of younger people in all of that work. So if I may take an action offline to meet with whoever's appropriate from the Youth Council to discuss that, I'd really value it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcella. I'm getting nods from Riley in the room and Regan and Kelly as well, so that I'm sure we can arrange that. Any other question? Yeah. If you can use your microphone, sorry.
Mine is on a similar vein. I would be really keen to work with you and get some insight into how we can evaluate some of our services around the support that we give to young people. So I would really love the opportunity to do that with you all.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other members? Oh, Alan, morning.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, and thanks to members of the Youth Council for your presentation. Also going to extend the same offer to meet and discuss more. I have already been working with our colleagues and friends at Youth Services about how we can support as a third sector more decision making by young people across our communities. So rather than just consulting with young people, actually give young people the money and decision making power, which I would love to explore more specifically with Youth Council as well. Two questions from me if I can. One is around your postcard campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about how you will collate the information from the postcard campaign and what you'll do with the information you collect in terms of influence and decision making? And the second question, a little bit more detailed, so again happy to pick up at another time, is around children's rights. So the responsibilities you mentioned, the work you've been doing with colleagues on rights. The Children's Rights in UNCRC puts a legal responsibility on public services, but I'm coordinating almost 2,000 community organisations who also have a kind of moral and ethical responsibility for our young people. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what we might do together to encourage communities to understand and promote children's rights. Thank you.
Are you happy to pick that up, Riley?
I'm more than willing to. We're more than willing to get back to yourself on all those things. I know a lot of people are keen to work with us, and we will try our best to do what we can. Obviously, with times and everything, but we'll try our best. On UNCRC, we think it is very crucial that the views are used, and we are more than willing to, if we have the capacity, to give you a hand with anything you need help with.
I think Stephen's probably captured some of those points as well, so yeah, we'll feed them back through. Any other members? Yes, Stephen?
Just interested in terms of what's been the most enjoyable thing so far, and what's the challenges that you've maybe faced to try and take things forward?
It definitely is a good thing to do. For me as MSYP, my highlight so far has been the sit-in up in Stirling. It was really educational and good to see other MSYPs. As a youth council as a whole, I think just our meetings in general, especially our in-person ones, they're always a lot better than online because we actually get to see each other. So we do enjoy that, and all our consultation and work we do enjoy doing it, and that's why we're in the role to continue to help young people in Dumfries and Galloway.
Good, thank you.
And any challenges that you faced or frustrations?
Probably balancing school and this is a little bit difficult. And that's probably our most challenging, and sometimes fitting everything in can be a little bit hard, but we make it work, so we do.
Thank you. And transport's always a bit of an issue as well, isn't it, with it being such a large region, but we very much value you coming in today as well, and it's great to have you in person. Good. I think that's nobody else indicating that they want to come in at this stage, so thank you. So we'll move on to item 4, Improvement Service, UNCRC and Children's Rights, National Picture and Support Resources. And I'm delighted to welcome Felicia Sloboda, who is the Child Poverty and UNCRC Project Officer from the Improvement Service, who is joining us online, and she's going to provide a national overview, and then we can open up for questions and observations. So welcome, Felicia.
Hi, good morning, welcome everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Perfect, great. I got my slides here as well. So today I've been asked to talk about the children's rights in general and also about the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Act that has some implications, quite a lot of implications on local authorities. So the outline of the presentation on the next slide shows that, first the general overview and then the aspirations and the implications of the Act and the support available at the Improvement Service. And I would like to start with discussing at first what human rights are. I know that you're probably quite familiar with the concept, but I thought it would be worth just reminding people of what the principle of human rights are. And it is basically a way of thinking about equality and fairness. Human rights are about letting us freely choose how we want to live our life and allowing us to develop our potential as human beings. They're about living a life free from fear, harassment and discrimination. And we all have them no matter where we are from, how old we are, what we believe, or how we choose to live our lives. Importantly, governments cannot pick or choose which rights to honour, and your rights can't be taken away from you, at least in principle. So human rights are codified in international law through a series of human rights conventions, and one of these conventions is the UNCRC, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And just a few words about the convention. So this convention is the most widely ratified international human rights treaty. Actually, there's only one country that never ratified it, and you can guess which country it is. It applies to everyone under the age of 18 and sets out children's rights in a way that recognizes that children are both vulnerable human beings, need of special protection, but also, very importantly, it recognizes that children are agents of their own lives, not just passive objects of care and charity. And the convention and the whole idea of children's rights is based on the premise that children should grow up in an environment of happiness, love, and understanding. And on the next slide, you can see just a summary of the 3 Ps. So the convention itself comprises of 54 articles, each denoting a specific right, and these articles can be grouped into the so-called 3 Ps, just for the ease of understanding. So this is provision, protection, and participation. So provision is about the rights that encompass survival needs, food, nutrition, health, shelter. Protection is about protecting children from any kinds of harm, and participation, as I said, it is about viewing children as agents of their own lives and in society as well. And just on the next slide, exploring some of these articles, just a few examples if you haven't had a chance to have a look at it. Yeah, but I'm sure you have. Article 24 talks about the right to health. Article 17 talks about the right to information in an age-appropriate way. Article 27 is about the right to adequate standard of living, housing, food, clothing. So there are 54 of these articles. And on the next slide, just to make it easier to understand what this convention and what children's rights are about in practice. So I'm sure you have come across with the concept of a children's rights approach, but what does that mean in practice? And for me, a children's rights approach is really a way of thinking. It is viewing children as human beings rather than human becomings. It is about treating them with respect and dignity and honouring their concerns, whether big or small. It is really about listening to children and young people, valuing their perspectives, and not just presuming we know what's best for them without even asking them. So while we can all recall what it is to be a child and treated as one, it's very important to remember and keep in mind that childhood is evolving. Today's children are growing up in an entirely different world that we knew when we were growing up, shaped by different events. If you think about the pandemic, lockdowns, and the influence of social media. So a child rights-based approach is about challenging our preconceptions of children and childhood, both in our everyday lives and in our work, like today, and upholding these principles very importantly that I highlighted. So Article 2, equality and non-discrimination. Article 3 is about the best interest of the child, which is very much linked to the right to participation. There's no decision about best interest without participation and the survival and development of children under Article 6. So these are the so-called UNCRC general principles that underpin all other rights in the Convention and are a backbone of a child rights-based approach. And on the next slide, what a children's rights approach is not. And it is not about giving children whatever they want. It is not about the competing rights of children and parents and adults. It is really about how we as society can ensure that children are protected and supported to lead a happy and healthy life. And a member of the Children's Parliament summed it up very nicely. And I'll just give you a few seconds to read this very nice quote from the member. And on the next slide, we can turn to the Act itself, and we can see that the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government had this intention in mind as well, that the intent behind the UNCRC Act is to deliver a proactive culture of everyday accountability for children's rights across public services in Scotland. So it is about, as I said, a mindset, a culture. There's no magic list when it comes to children's rights, protecting children's rights. And this Act aims to ensure that public authorities are now legally required to respect, protect and fulfill children's rights in everything they do. And on the next slide, I have highlighted some of the sections of the legislations that are quite relevant to public bodies. So importantly, Section 6 talks about the duty not to act incompatibly with the UNCRC. So this applies to all listed authorities, but also those who carry out functions of a public nature. So that is important when it comes to procurement and outsourcing. And this duty applies to legislation arising from acts of the Scottish Parliament only. Got the Children's Rights Scheme, which is relevant to Scottish ministers and required them to publish an annual plan and report on steps they have taken to further children's rights, highlighted in the legislation that it's important that they ensure children's participation, awareness raising, budgeting, complaints mechanisms, and child rights impact assessment, alongside many other requirements. And then we have the reporting duty that many of you are familiar with. Listed public bodies are required to report on past and future actions on furthering children's rights, and this is cross-cutting across all services. And on the next slide, just a couple of more points there. So that's where the teeth of the legislation is showing. So under the Act, children and young people can complain if their rights are not being protected, and courts can tell an organisation to change their behaviour if they find that there was some kind of violation of children's rights. And no time limits on proceedings until children reach the age of 18 years old. And the Children and Young People's Commissioner has received new powers, and they now have the power to support individuals, children and their representatives to take cases to court if they wish to, if they see that there's a legitimate concern regarding children's rights. And on the next slide, I just highlighted that the UNCRC legislation, again, it is not just about children's services, it is cross-cutting. The legislation directly aligns with other policy areas, such as child poverty, the promise, getting it right for every child, whole family wellbeing fund, trauma-informed practice, violence against women and girls, community learning and development. And these are the obvious ones. However, this does not mean that other areas are not impacted by the legislation. As I said, all public authorities and services and policy agendas are impacted by this legislation because children are virtually everywhere and impacted by decisions made in all services and policy areas, from transport to housing through adult services as well. In fact, so far as I know, the most complaints raised under the legislation is related to transport. So there is a need that all services are aware of the legislation and know how to comply with the requirements. And that's where the implement service comes into picture. On the next slide, I have highlighted the support available at the implement service when it comes to the implementation of this legislation. And we offer a range of different resources that you can access on our website, and I have highlighted a few. I'm happy to share them in an email as well for dissemination. And today I'm going to talk about the Getting Ready for UNCRC framework, which I know that some of your colleagues have already looked at. And on the next slide, just the main framework itself, I'm going to quickly go through, and the purpose of the framework, which is based on a theory of change written by the Scottish Children's Rights Observatory. And as you can see, it outlines a number of key steps that will help public bodies and their partners to demonstrate their commitment to children's rights and further embed children's rights approach across the organisation. So first of all, it's important that there's buy-in from leadership, so strategic leadership and commitment, and participation of children and young people alongside with that, which is linked to Article 12 of the Convention. And it really focuses on how you engage with children and young people in a meaningful, sustainable way, and how do you really empower them to challenge rights breaches as well. The frameworks also have some challenge questions around training and awareness raising you're carrying out to support your workforce to understand children's rights and how it applies to their service area and delivery, which is important for those services especially which are currently not connected to children and young people much, but which do have an impact on the realization of children's rights. You will also need to ensure you have child-friendly complaints mechanisms, and the SPSO have recently published a guidance on child-friendly complaints as well, and also child-friendly publications, making it accessible to children in an age-appropriate way. You need to think about how are you going to monitor progress and use this to improve practice. And also it's important to think about whose rights are most at risk in your area. And this is often related to protected characteristics and also socioeconomic disadvantage and traumatic experiences as a child. Children's rights budgeting is another thing that is important to consider. And we are currently undertaking an exploratory action inquiry into children's rights budgeting with a handful of local authorities. And as soon as we have the output of that research, we will disseminate it. And then to fulfill the reporting duty, how are you reporting on children's rights? Many local authorities have already been doing this through children's services, but as I said, the legislation requires that a more holistic approach that covers all services. And just to sum up on the next slide, each organization will be at different points in their journey, and what this framework allows you is to look across your practice and identify where you need to focus your activity or resources to implement children's rights, and you can use the framework quite flexibly. In the past, we had local authorities using it to develop an action plan. You have already talked about that to some extent, and you can also use the framework. It has some challenge questions, so you can get together and think about where your current position is and where you want to progress in the future, in short, medium, and longer term. You can also use the framework just to get practice examples from different areas, and just to get your colleagues, engage your colleagues, and think about children's rights in a more strategic way. And on the last slide, I do have our contact details linked to our website, but as I said, happy to share them in an email. And we also have a knowledge hub, which is a library of useful resources that you're very welcome to join, and some other useful links there. So that's me, I believe.
Thank you, Felicia, for a very comprehensive overview of the national picture and the support resource that's out there. Happy open to members for any questions or comment. Yes, of course, Dawn.
Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate that. It's a very specific point, but I'm just interested to understand. You said the most complaints made around, and breaches relate to transport, and I'm just interested to understand: is that related to, or are the complaints that are made directed to individual organisations? Is that a collation of all kind of complaints that are made to each organisation involved in transport? I'm just interested in, how that works and how, we can take the learning from those complaints. And if you could just give a little bit of insight into any other kind of significant areas beyond transport, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll bring you in, Felicia.
Sure, I would love to give you details, just because it is a complaint process. I can't really, because it hasn't really finished yet. So as soon as the complaint is it is completed, the whole process, I think the SPSO will be able to give more details. But these are anecdotal stories, what we are seeing just yet. So it is not something that has completed just yet. We have had some local authorities who said they have received some complaints, and most of them are transport related. But we have a peer support network meeting, and we have some of your colleagues who are member of the peer support network meeting, and that's exactly what we do. We share intelligence, we share good practice, and try to support each other when it comes to challenges of children's rights and good practice, and how to you know, everyone is new to this area. It is a very new legislation, and it is the first nation, a devolved nation, that is implementing children's rights, incorporating children's rights into Scots law. So that it's going to be a huge learning curve. We try to share as much as we can.
Thanks for that, Felicia. So the data will build as time goes on and the bill's better understood, presumably. Yeah. Councillor McFarlane. Morning, Andy.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Thank you for that. And thank you, Felicia, for your presentation. It's very thought-provoking, really. And I think that some of the stuff that you've been talking about there is stuff that I'm not aware that we're doing, so perhaps we've got work to do. I was going to ask about the transport, because that sort of was one that jumped out at me. And clearly in Scotland, we have the free travel for youngsters under 22. But of course, if you don't have the infrastructure, they can't make use of it. So I would be interested to know how much influence we'd be able to sort of exert in making sure that we provide that, and what responsibility there would be on the providers. But one of the things that makes legislation work is sanctions. And I'd be interested to know how we can make sure that this is done. You know, how is it going to be enforced? And clearly, I'm saying that from a position whereby I believe that we should be adopting it and we should be embedding it within the things that we do. But where there are gaps, how do we make sure that we get it done, and what are the sanctions for not doing it? Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Felicia?
Well, as I said in the presentation, so the legislation does give the power to courts to provide remedy and compensation if there's a rights breach. So it is really about empowering children and young people and their representatives to know their rights, and if they believe that their rights are not being respected, then I think the aspiration is to resolve it at the complaints level. So that's why the SPSO is really working on a child-friendly complaints procedure that will help local authorities to manage these complaints. They are not expecting, you know, huge waves of complaints coming in. It will be probably areas that are most critical, and that they would want to address that as a group instead of individual cases. That's what the commissioners, the Children and Young People Commissioners Scotland said as well, that they are going to look at cases that has a strategic impact, that have the most impact on children's rights. So it will be about litigation, complaints, and it is a long-term process as well. I don't know if that really answered your question, but we'll see how the courts react and how they are going to adjudicate, and then will have case law. And when we have a bank of case law, it is a bit easier to understand the implications and how we can sanction behaviour, and how that changes behaviour over time as well.
Are you happy with that, Andy?
Yeah, thanks. And I think you make a very good point there. You know, once you have case law, people see potentially what the consequences might be of ignoring this, and as a consequence then got on board with it. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I have no other... Oh, Councillor Campbell. Morning.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Being Chair of Swesttrans, you know, I thought I'd better come in because transport's been mentioned a couple of times, and we haven't, dealt with a few of the other issues. But I'm just wondering, is there a way, now that the Act's been implemented through the Scottish Parliament, that, that the youth can sort of direct their concerns to the likes of Transport Scotland, for example? I know there's a duty on public bodies, NHS, councils and things like that, but there are other public bodies out there like Transport Scotland, and they need to hear, direct from the youth, the issues that they do have with transport. But obviously there's an ongoing situation where they're collecting information. So I don't know if we have to wait until then, or is there a way that we can drive that forward. I'm conscious that item 5 we're going to be talking about public bodies anyway, so I was going to leave it till then, Chair, but I just thought I'd raise it now. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Felicia, do you want to pick up on that? Is there a mechanism for complaints to Transport Scotland, basically?
Well, nothing stops children and young people to complain. It's more about enabling them to complain to Transport Scotland. They can raise a complaint with Transport Scotland, absolutely. The mechanisms are there. Like adults can complain, children can complain as well. Also, adults on behalf of children can complain, and they should. And the more they complain, especially from a children's perspective, and using the language of children's rights, because transport links to so many other rights as well, from health when it comes to appointments, education, standard of living, and using the rights language and this legislation. Absolutely, it is important to directly engage with these organisations and holding them to account.
Thank you. With that, no other members. So thank you very much for your time this morning, Felicia, and I'm sure this is something we'll discuss again at a future point and might have a bit more data by then as well, which would be really useful. So thanks very much again. Has the contact details been cascaded from the presentation?
Not yet, Chair,
No.
but if Felicia sends
Yeah.
any additional information, I can pass it on after
Yeah.
the meeting. Okay,
That's
thank you.
perfect. Good, thank you. So that moves us neatly into item 5, which is children's rights in Dumfries and Galloway. And we've got Darren Little with us this morning, Children's Services Manager, to speak to the report and hopefully facilitate some discussion. Morning, Darren.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Just to begin with, if it's okay, I'd just like to thank the Youth Council for the contribution that they made to the rights agenda locally in terms of the work that they outlined, particularly in relation to the engagement, really support us to land in the position that we're in now, and I think we're in a good place to move forward. So thank you, and look forward to continuing that work as we go. I think as well, just to recognise Felicia and colleagues at the Improvement Service who came and supported us initially when we pulled together our elected member, Youth Council and Officer Working Group, and also for the provision of the framework, which Felicia outlined. And in terms of the key areas, if you've seen the action plan that's associated with the rights report, those key areas are really reflected within, and those have really supported us as well in guiding us in terms of key areas that we need to address locally. So again, thank you, colleagues. At the March meeting of Community Planning Partnership Boards, I came and provided an update on the work that had been going on locally involving Council, NHS and the Youth Council in relation to children's rights, and specifically in relation to the 2020 to 23 rights report. And Community Planning Partnership Board at that meeting discussed the potential of the next rights report for 2023 to 26 to include contributions from wider community planning partners. And a number of partners in the room, around the table, in the room today and virtually, of course, indicated that they would be happy to collaborate. And what we said at that meeting was, when we had the joint meeting today, we would have a further opportunity to discuss that. So that's the reason for my paper today, really, to pick up on that piece of business and bring forward some recommendations and hopefully have a bit of a discussion around that particular topic. If it's okay, I'll just pick up on a few developments that have happened since that meeting. So there has been positive progress, both in terms of the work within the Council and Health. A few highlights just to mention. Both when we agreed the rights report, Dumfries and Galloway Council and NHS Board both made a commitment to children's rights, and since then the respective management teams of both organisations have also went on to make that commitment. I think that's important to share. Within the Council, we now have 110 of our schools achieving at least bronze of the Rights, Respect in Schools Awards, 32 schools achieving silver and 10 achieving gold. And in terms of that engagement that we facilitated working with the Youth Council, what came through was that the Rights, Respect in Schools Award is really important in terms of raising awareness of children's rights, supporting them to understand and be positioned to take advantage of the rights that they have. Also, in terms of the child-friendly complaints that Felicia mentioned, the Council worked with SPSO, particularly through education and social work, to pilot child-friendly complaints locally. So we're now looking to take that to the next stage in terms of embedding that within our core practice. Just another couple of points. Within the Health and Social Care Partnership, so collaboratively between the Council and Health, we've brought forward a new advocacy plan, again, which relates to one of the points that was in the action plan that was agreed. In terms of moving forward, I think also just to mention that we've already agreed to repeat that engagement with young people that we carried out in 2023 once more in advance of the next rights report, so we can see that progress that's been made in terms of our rights work. Also, in terms of understanding the progress that we're making, in 2025, we've agreed to give an update against all the actions that we agreed as part of the rights report alongside the Children's Services Plan. So that will go to NHS Board, it will go to Full Council, it will also come here to Community Planning Partnership Board. So in 2025, there'll be almost a temperature check of where we're at and the progress that we've made before we then publish a full rights report in 2026, covering the period 23 to 26. So in terms of the ask of today, it's really what else we could do and how we could possibly work together within the Community Planning Partnership. Within the paper, I've outlined a couple of options. There's various things that we could do. One of them, of course, is that we simply replicate the rights report process as we did for 2020 to 23, but we involve a wider range of community planning partners and draw out those experiences. Within Scotland, there are some other examples. So, for example, on an annual basis, Together, a national organisation, pull together a state of rights report, and every year they select an area of focus. So that could also be a consideration for us, as opposed to having a report across and involving community planning partners across all areas of children's rights. It may be that for the next iteration we would agree an area of focus that collectively between the Youth Council and partners we agree is important to us. So, you know, it could be that we decide that we'd like to take a look at participation, for example, and how well across all of our partners we're truly providing those opportunities. In terms of today as well, Children in Scotland, who are another national organisation, offered to facilitate some additional training. So there is that offer for community planning partnerships, and indeed us specifically if we'd like to pick that up. So today, the ask of you really is to note where we are, provide any feedback, and to really consider the views of the Youth Council, and finally to consider that offer of training from Children in Scotland as to whether or not we'd like to pick that up. Chair, if it's okay just to add, colleague Fiona Payton's also joining us online, and Fiona just this week has taken up the role of Child Health Commissioner in NHS, and Fiona has already had a key role to play in supporting us for the rights agenda, but also will do so in that new capacity moving forward. I just wondered if it would be okay to invite her in.
Absolutely. Fiona, morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Darren. Yes, so obviously I've worked very closely with Darren through our Children's Services Partnership anyway on the current rights report, and in taking up the role of Child Health Commissioner, then I'll lead within developing a steering group within NHS Dumfries and Galloway to look at each of the points through the rights report action plan, and to ensure that incorporation is taken through the NHS. But obviously everything that we do is very much a joint to the rights report is very much a joint work, but we need to have that specific focus specifically on child health. I will be supported by Alison Telfer, who's our participation lead for children and young people. in the board. She has very much up until now had a specific focus on CAMS, but has agreed to support wider child health within this piece of work as well, which I'm delighted to share. So early days for us, and I'll be being in touch with a number of my colleagues within health to join that steering group and take forward each of the actions that relate to their particular area or department. Thank you.
Many thanks for that, Fiona. I know it's been a massive piece of work, and I know that the elected members that were involved in it very much valued the contributions that they were able to make and help to shape it. So thank you for your hard work on that, Darren. Just in terms of the training before I open up to members, would that be for individuals to arrange, or would it be something that as a board we would arrange for a number of people?
Thank you, Chair. Stephen can maybe come in if he likes, but the offers to the Community Planning Partnership Board, so it would potentially merit an offer of an additional session.
Yeah, that would make more sense than folk doing it individually. So I'll open up to members. Any questions or comments? Councillor Campbell. And then Lucy.
Thanks, Chair. It's just an observation. I mean, I was looking at the appendix, and it's the second sort of paragraph, which the children and young people tell us about their rights. And right at the very bottom, they said it is important that adults know about children's rights. They want to see more awareness raising within communities, and what actions, which is over the page, particularly the fourth bullet point, the Council will develop a public publicity campaign to raise awareness in the general public about children's rights, which I think is probably the right approach to do. But at this moment in time, it's clear that the young people know about, or quite a lot of them know about their children's rights. However, apart from the adults in the room and the elected members, when we go through committees, when we get reports and things like that, you know, it's quite concerning if it's a low amount of adults across the region that don't know about children's rights. I don't know if the children, once they've been through their respective schools, and do they go back and talk to their parents? Probably not. I don't know is the answer, but I think it's the right approach. So it's really an observation, and I think we should, you know, make every effort that all adults across Dumfries and Galloway know about children's rights. Thanks.
Thanks very much, John. You were getting a thumbs up online from Andy McFarlane as well. Dawn, shall I turn to you just now?
It's just in response to Councillor Campbell's comments, and thank you, Darren, for the report and all the work and everybody involved in this. I'm just wondering whether there's an appetite from the board for that, you know, that approach to raising awareness to be kind of collectively sponsored and progressed, because we all have our reach into different communities and, you know, through our service delivery. And how we work with different groups within our region, that there's probably merit in a joint approach to have the maximum reach and have the opportunity to maximise our impact. So it's just in response to Councillor Campbell highlighting that particular area. I think there's merit in exploring an approach that's sponsored collectively by Community Planning Partnership Board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, and you were getting a thumbs up from Julie White online. So, Lucy, I'll turn to you, and then Councillor Thompson.
This is just a comment on under recommendations on 4.2. This is about broadening the 2023 to 26 to be broader than council and NHS. There was a conversation about this and an opinion that was voiced by multiple people that while the council and the NHS is integral to the Children's Rights Report, it's always good to have a more diverse opinion from other organisations, because sometimes people who may not be accessing council services, or people that the council may unfortunately miss or not get the full opinion of, need to be represented, and it's in the Youth Council's opinion that the most informed view is mostly the best view, and that I think extra training and bringing in other organisations would be really beneficial to the next UNCRC report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for that. That's very helpful. Take that on board. Yep, good. Councillor Thompson. Morning, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just on the back of Lucy's point, I think. So, if you imagine a world and then a building, and then inside the building there's a room with a table and chairs and a window where the light comes in, and we're all sitting around that table, and I think maybe our public sector partners are in that room as well, and we're very on board with the values that we've just heard from the presentation and all the things that we'd like to embed in the way we do our work. But, I think in 1844 was the Factories Act, if you cast your mind back. And it brought in the legislation that I think recognised, that child labour was basically a form of being abused. So it restricted, I think, 15-year-olds to only having to work no more than 9 hours a day. And it was basically it was an improvement then. And I think now, while we'll be on board with this and we can embed that in our public sector values, we're only a fraction of the enterprises and organisations and activities that go in the whole region. And I'm sure there'll be people in the room today that know of children from 14 upwards who are working not through the books, cash in hand, less than 0 hour contract, and it will be familiar because everybody knows it. And at the end of the day, people want a job and a bit of pocket money and stuff like that. But that goes on. It's de rigueur in the tourism industry, the catering industry, many industries, right? So if that's what's happening out with our room inside the nice building, but that's the rest of the world, then how much impact does this have? And it's maybe about how do we bring the rest of the community in Dumfries and Galloway into that and not just the public sector partners. So it's about what impact and what difference does this make, or do we have to go back 170, 80 years, whatever, and say, do you know what, actually, we need another Factories Act to actually embed that in the private sector or the other sectors, because this sounds great, but if it's not getting to the heart of the issue, then we need to maybe work a bit harder with our partners. Thank you.
Absolutely, Stephen. And I think that's where the messaging and the sort of promoting the values of this is really important between all of our partners. Darren, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just maybe to offer some additional comments to that point, and maybe the point of Councillor Campbell, just to say that within both Council and NHS, we've now got access to an e-learning module, which we're looking to promote across staff. So, of course, as two of the most significant employers, we're going to reach a large number of the adult population in our region. That's something that could be shared more broadly across community planning partners if there was an appetite to have access to that. Also, in terms of the Rights, Respect in Schools Award, there is an element of that which should and will involve promotion of rights to parents. So again, we've got reach to a large number of adults through our education provision. We've got that opportunity to connect, utilising those existing touch points. But that's not to say we can't do more. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I've got John Dugan and then Rob and then Alan. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to build on comments from previous speakers, I think it's really important we do get the message out there. So I think, firstly, it would be really good if the Community Planning Partnership Board did collectively do that piece of training as a body, because that's a very clear message that we're actually believing in what we're trying to get out to our communities. And I'm just really interested in developing the conversation about the schools and the various school awards. You mentioned numbers for bronze, silver and gold. What commitments do the school make by getting that award to actually getting that message out to the young people in the school, but also the parents and the community that they support? I have to put my hand up and say that I'm not sure that my child goes to secondary. I'm not quite sure if that school has got an award, if they're working to that award. So, there's not sufficient information out there. So how can we make sure that if they are going for that award, that the communities and the numbers of people can be made aware about how important this piece of work is?
Thank you. I think it may be of interest if I maybe share some additional information with a minute in terms of the Rights, Respect in Schools Award, but absolutely a core element of that is the sharing with parents. Of course, there are increasing requirements as you progress through the levels of the award. So again, there's maybe the next time I'm back, I can maybe provide a more fuller update specifically in relation to rights, respect in schools, if that would be welcomed.
John?
Yeah, absolutely, that would be welcome. I suppose I'm also thinking, is there somewhere on maybe the council website that actually celebrates schools who have done this piece of training and how they're developing their understanding and their community cohesiveness because of it? Because parents might want to look at that also.
Sorry, my button's a bit sticky today. Rob, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say briefly, is I think that we would, from a SOSI's perspective, want to contribute to the next rights report, which I think had already been previously discussed and alluded to at earlier meetings. And also very much, I think, to endorse Don's point about having common message across the piece. Again, I think that's something we'd be enthusiastic about and want to assist with and support. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Rob. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Along the same lines, I just wanted to particularly support Lucy's comments around the wider the input, the more viable and impactful the results come. So absolutely endorse that, to support Dawn's suggestion about a partnership approach to communication and to holding on to that together. And also just to make a common point around the formalities of some of the reporting, and important for the partnership to make a distinction between UNCRC incorporation, which is a duty on public bodies, and the wider issue of children's rights. They're not all the same. So there's a duty for public bodies to report, but there should be an intention for us all to uphold and protect children's rights. I think it's important that we recognise the distinction between both. Thanks.
Absolutely, Alan, thank you. Stuart?
Well, I would absolutely agree about the access to the information on the council website. I'd like to highlight the drive to this information and like to ask, what exactly are we doing to ensure that both young folk and their parents access this information regardless of whether it's there or not?
Darren, I'll let you pick up on that.
So in terms of the Rights, Respect in Schools Award specifically, that's a single school-led initiative, so that may take different forms in each school. More broadly, at the moment we're in the process of developing a children's services web offer, and that's going to be targeted at children and young people, parents and carers, and professionals from across the partnership. We're looking at having something really going live in the middle of November, so that will be a single point where information at a sort of global, regional level should be available. But as I say, individual school-related developments will be progressed individually because of the nature of the award, because there's not one answer, because it's a co-productive approach. Each school's arrangements may look slightly different. You know, what each school comes up with their children and young people in terms of delivering on the Rights, Respect in Schools Award might slightly vary. So there will be that local variation, but we'll have some consistent information available on the new Children's Services website. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Do you want to come back in, Stuart?
Aye, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Julie White online. Morning, Julie.
Good morning, everybody, and apologies that I can't be there in person this morning. Just want to say, first of all, a huge thank you to the members of the Youth Council. For those of you I don't know, I'm the new Chief Executive for NHS Dumfries and Galloway, so really look forward to working with you as a Youth Council moving forward. I just wanted to come back, if I could, Chair, just on, I think, just make a couple of comments. I think Dawn's point about the awareness raising and us doing something collective rather than that being done through the local authorities is a really important one, and something that I would absolutely want to give our commitment as an NHS board to be part of that. But I wanted to come back to Darren's question about how we take forward this next piece of work, and and we talked about, and it's really great to hear our partners across the community planning partnership saying that they're all keen to make that contribution to that next sort of report. But for me, I'd be really keen to hear whether or not the Youth Council would be willing to consider the other approach that Darren was describing in terms of, and I don't think these are mutually exclusive. I don't think it's one or the other. I think we absolutely need to take that collective approach moving forward across all partners. But Darren also mentioned the possibility of us focusing in on one key area or one or two kind of key areas of focus collectively. And I think given this agenda is so huge, in order for us to actually get some real tangible actions across our partnership and really feel that we're making a difference to young people in the region, I wonder if it would be worthwhile as also taking that second approach that Darren was describing in terms of identifying an area of focus that we could work on together, whether that be around provision, protection or participation. And I just wondered whether, Chair, the members of the Youth Council would be willing to take that away and consider it and think about, or if they do have a view today to share with us around whether that would be a helpful way forward in order for us to really hone in on aspects of this work to identify sort of some key actions across our community planning partnership that we should take forward. So I'd just be keen to hear the thoughts on that, Gail. Thanks.
Ailsa, would you like to come in on that point?
Yeah, I think that it would be beneficial to focus on one thing. However, there may be an issue with kind of how the rest of the rights fall into place. Focusing on one key aspect would be good in a sense that it would be, you know, there would be a lot of work done on that single area, but it's the other areas wouldn't be as focused on as well. So there might be a quite fine line between that, but I think it would be something good to consider.
Julie, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I suppose just to reassure colleagues, I wasn't suggesting that we only did the one thing. I think we absolutely need to do that broad piece of work that we're agreeing collectively. But I just wondered whether from a Youth Council perspective there were specific elements of it that they felt we could do better on and that they wanted us to dedicate a bit more time and effort to. But absolutely take the point from Ailsa there just in terms of the risks associated with that. But if there was, you know, as I say, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think it's about us doing one or the other. But if there was an area for us to hone in particularly on, I think that would be I'd be quite interested to hear that. But no, I absolutely appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Presumably that's something that you can take back to the wider Youth Council and have a discussion around and then come back to us, if that would be okay. And we'll mark that as an action. Yeah, that okay, Darren? Valerie, morning.
Morning. Thanks, Gail. Just, I suppose, on behalf of the kind of community planning senior leadership team, I'm sure they would be very happy to participate in the training that was offered as well, because I think it's important is that we would be really focused on that too. So, thanks.
So I'm not seeing any other members wishing to come in. Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting me back in. It was just obviously in the appendix on page 25. It sort of reports back in the 2020 to 23 period, and I think the fact that it was the young people had said they wanted more information on specific rights, for example, in the workplace, and then the action that Council and NHS would take would be that there would be information for children and young people about rights in the workplace. And I think the specific issue with this is that there is a duty on our bodies to report, but there's no duty, as far as I can tell, in the world outside of this. And I think that's where the story breaks down, and I think that's where we can get it right here, but if the real world is saying, yeah, but that's nice, you've been all prepared in an environment for that, and now it's not like that at all. So I think there's maybe further work to be done, because I don't know what impact that action had, and I think part of what we're doing here is maybe how do we keep track of the impact our actions have to know that we're being effective, basically, or if we need to tweak it to be more effective. Thank you.
Darren.
Thank you. Just to highlight that there has been work progressed by human resources colleagues in the local authority in relation to that particular point. However, in terms of the point of monitoring, the point where we will come back with a fuller update will be in 2025, where we bring an update against each of the actions that were agreed in the respective action plans. as part of the Children's Services Plan Joint Annual Report. Thank you.
You okay with that, Stephen? Yep, good. So no other speakers? Good, so thank you very much for that, Darren, and you know, it's the start of a journey, so I look forward to going along it with you. That's great, thank you. So moving on to, sorry, wrong part of my page. Item 6, Tobacco and Vaping Consensus Statement and Proposed Actions, and Valerie White's here to take us through the key issues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I think it's really great to have the Youth Council here when we're talking about this issue today, because through the 10,000 voices, there was a feedback about a great deal of concern about tobacco and vaping and the issue that our young people wanted to know most about. So that has led directly to an action in our local outcome improvement plan to co-produce an education an awareness raising programme with children and young people across the region for rollout. So I think that's actually a really great example of feedback that we've had from children and young people in an action directly taken within it, because I think this issue in terms of tobacco and vaping does align very much with the UNCER and that importance of protecting our children and young people from health-harming behaviours. So we've talked about this matter quite a few times at the Community Planning Partnership Board, and one of the things that Community Planning had asked is there more that we can do together to address the real concern that there is about tobacco, which still remains a really major cause of ill health and death across Scotland, but the rising concern that there is about the level of youth vaping, which has increased significantly. So I had said at a previous meeting that my colleagues in Public Health Scotland and Scottish Directors of Public Health were producing a statement which was outlining some of the action that could be taken to address this area, and we've provided the copy of the statement within the papers today. So the areas that are being highlighted in this are to look at price, availability, environment, promotion, resilience and positive attitude control and prevention. And what we've outlined in the paper is some suggestions of things where we could take action for it. Now, some of the actions could be taken forward through a letter to Scottish Government to really reinforce our support for what's in the programme for Government in terms of recommendations for tobacco and vaping. But also there is an opportunity the Scottish Government have through the 2016 Tobacco Act that they could actually put in some protections sooner. So that's something that could be included in the letter, and also that control in terms of affordability, about a minimum price for e-cigarettes and vapes as well, but with higher prices for tobacco, recognising the harm that results from tobacco smoking. So there's a number of those actions could be taken forward in a letter to Scottish Government on behalf of community planning, which could cover some of those some of those areas. But there's also things that we can also do in terms of availability, price and inequalities. And one of those things is about making all people aware of the services that there are in terms of the Quit Your Way smoking cessation services. And some other things as well that we could actually do in terms of promotion, which is if the Community Planning Partnership would like to issue a statement to retailers within the region to actually ask them to consider how they promote these products, because we know that these products are being targeted. They're bright, there are lots of flavours, they are put in positions where children and young people can see them really easily and they look really attractive. So we could actually put a call out to say that actually could retailers consider the placement of these products and where they're placed in terms of that, because that would be in line with providing an environment that doesn't expose children to marketing, which is really can be a harmful influence. And the other couple of areas that we could consider is about and this might be in terms of advertising. Do partners across the region have ability to influence advertising and what is advertised in spaces that we have, so that actually we would make sure that we have a position that we don't have things that will harm health, or that vaping was promoted in those areas, and also is this an area that we would want to focus on? Very aware that trading standards do a lot of work in relation to that, but is there something targeted in terms of a bit of focus in terms of places that are selling to children and young people where they and the fines that could be applied to that. So really keen to get the Youth Council's opinion in terms of some of these recommendations, because it would be great to hear that. So I'll open up for questions. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you very much for that, Valerie. Before I move to members, it was a bit remiss of me that we didn't go through the recommendations for the previous item. So my apologies. We'll just quickly skip back. So we were asked to note the current position in relation to children's rights in UNCRC in Dumfries and Galloway, which we did. And we provided feedback to officers, and so that's absolutely covered as well. And we've considered the views of the Youth Council members and the offer from Children in Scotland for training, and I think we'll take up that opportunity for training. So, is that agreed? Yeah, that was remiss of me. My apologies. My brain's a wee bit elsewhere. Yes, okay, so I'll open to members. Ailsa, thank you.
I found it really interesting, one of the calls for action, which is the price of e-cigarettes. If there is, say that a vape is equivalent to 20 cigarettes, why should the 20 cigarettes be £14 and a vape could be priced at £4 to £5? I think that's one of the real reasons why e-cigarettes are such a big thing, because it's more accessible for people to access because of the price of them. I was also really interested with the controlling the measures and restricting it and like introducing a licensing fee, because you obviously need a license to sell alcohol. So why shouldn't it be that for tobacco and e-cigarette products?
Very, very good points. Yes, Valerie.
Yeah, no, they are very, very good points. And one of the issues that we know in terms of the evidence tells us about kind of health-harming products, it's the affordability, the availability, and how attractive they're made. So all those things that you've talked about are really important. We very much know the health-harming behaviours of smoking and tobacco, and that has really led to the increases in tax to make them, less attractive, less affordable for people, so that actually it's helping to protect them at kind of a policy level. We are in a new position in terms of vapes. It's a relatively new insert in terms of the marketing of them. So these have come on as a kind of new product, and a lot of the consultation about legislation is, should these be being, as cheap as they can be? And so I think that's one of the things that we would be putting forward in, well, that's for Community Plan and Partnership to consider, whether actually they want to say, actually there should be a minimum pricing set for vaping to actually make it less affordable, because that does make it less attractive. I think there is a recognition, though, that smoking is absolutely extremely harmful. Vaping, we actually don't know the long-term impacts, but it's really clear that whilst vaping might have a public health benefit, for somebody switching completely to that, if they've been a smoker, there is no public health benefit for anybody to take up vaping, and it certainly isn't something that we'd want children and young people to take up. So we do need to, we've got an opportunity now to really take a bit of a focus on this. So certainly that call for thinking about a minimum pricing in the same way that there is to do with tobacco, but recognising that tobacco is extremely harmful. And so there's so that'd be a slight price differential in relation to that. And again, licensing as well. You're right, we do license premises for alcohol, and so that's in terms of to help with the kind of regulation of what is being sold. That actually it would be to have that is to advocate for having some kind of licensing fee as well for shops that were wishing to sell that.
Thank you, Valerie. I've got Stuart, and then John Dugan, and then Lucy.
I would just like to also mention that in this case, a lot of that is in regards to specifically legal vapes having 20 cigarettes. There have been many cases, in fact the majority of illegal vapes, of having multiple times over the legal limit of nicotine in them, as well as their packagings and casings being made from non-safe materials. I would especially like to express interest in finding out where or how these ones are being more obtained, because the majority of them being sold at such cheap prices are the ones which are legal, which means that they are far more addictive and far less of a health benefit to the young folk or anyone who's trying to quit cigarettes in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Presumably that's something that Trading Standards would cover for retailers in particular. I don't know how stringent it is. No, Valerie.
I think that's the point. Regulation in this area does need to be kind of tightened up. But I think one of the valid points that you're raising is that vapes are becoming more available with lots of different chemicals in them as well, and people not knowing sometimes what actually is actually in some of the vapes that are moving about. So that is also an area of concern.
Thanks, Valerie. John?
Thanks very much. Obviously, it has been a discussion paper that we've been looking at for several community planning partnership boards. I welcome the report that we've got in front of us and the areas that we've been asked to look at. I want to look at the issue of item 5, control. Currently, young people of certain ages can buy, if you meet that criteria, can buy vapes legally. But there's a significant element of trade happening across not just Dumfries and Galloway, but the country, where no ID is being requested and young people are able to access and purchase. And I think that's when we're wanting our colleagues within Trading Standards to have the kit to be able to really enforce and to make sure that if you try and buy and you're not of that age, then the trader needs to make sure that they're meeting all the criteria. If you go into one of the supermarkets to buy alcohol, you might be asked for ID. Sadly, I don't get asked that anymore. But there will be times that young people are able to purchase without any challenge, and I think that needs to be beefed up, and the way of reporting that to colleagues at Trading Standards is important. I also wonder, I do support the information about taking correspondence to government, but I wonder, as you as leader, whether there's an opportunity for council leaders through COSLA to really get the message across of this community planning board, but also other colleagues might be experiencing that in Scotland too. So we're actually speaking to government, but we're speaking in one voice about the concerns that we have and what the young people have said to us through their 10,000 voices.
Thank you very much for that, John. All very insightful, and certainly we can go through COSLA as well. I'm sure it's discussed at their Community and Wellbeing Board on a regular basis, but I haven't been involved in that work directly, but we can reach out to them. Great. I've got Lucy and then Max.
This is just to talk about where it talks about promotion and it being displayed in shops. I think that this needs to be controlled, because if you think you're going into a shop and you're going to go buy cigarettes, you're a young person, you've never bought cigarettes before, they're in black boxes, you can't see the brands. That is going to make it a lot harder for a young person to have the confidence in going and buy cigarettes. It's completely different with vapes. They're all displayed. Some are even on the outside of the shops. There's stands. You can tell what brands they are. You can tell exactly what flavours. It's going to be a lot more easier for a young person to try and go in and ask for a vape. And vapes need to be treated in industries like in corner shops exactly like cigarettes, because obviously we don't know the long-term harms of it, and we know the long-term harm of tobacco, but we don't know the long-term harm of vapes. But we have seen young people getting popped lungs filled with fluid, and if this is what the effects that young people are getting at our age, what is going to be the effect in 50 years? So we really need to ramp up on vapes being treated exactly like cigarettes, because the unknown should scare us and should scare us about our health, because we do not know what is going to happen to those young people in 50 years. Thank you.
Very well said, Lucy. It's one thing that always strikes me when I'm going to our local shop is that the whole of the front of the shop is covered in watermelon and strawberry and, you know, buzzy colours and very enticing. I don't know how they get away with that, but that's just another matter altogether. Max?
Thank you. It's just about like piggybacking off Lucy's point too. Like when you go into a shop, like cigarettes are hidden. Like this was introduced like way back. So I'm just thinking, whenever vapes came onto the scene, why was this not like the same? Because they contain tobacco. So if you're hiding tobacco, why are you not hiding products that contain it too? Because it's like same harm, even could be worse. And just another point, like there's none in here that really talks about like helping with addiction. Like I just don't think there's enough help out there for people that get addicted and like can't stop. So I think we just need to try and reach out to young people and give them the support that they need.
Valerie, do you want to pick up on that cessation point?
Yeah, no, we do have our smoking cessation services, and I think they are looking just now at actually how they can provide support for vaping for people that have got addicted, because it is very addictive. Can be very addictive for individuals. So that is something that our services are looking at, and I can certainly take that view back to my colleague Abby Robertson to see that. And I would think as well that will be coming up in the conversations and the awareness training as well in relation to that. And I know that there is some talk about some digital support for stopping vaping as well, which is being looked at on a kind of national basis. So I think there's probably there's an opportunity to use technology as well in terms of that. But I will certainly pick that back up with Abby and see where that is, and I can get something back to you to update the Youth Council in terms of that too.
Okay, Max, good. I've got Marsali online and then Louise, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It seems really appropriate today that we've got this report in the context of the children's rights discussion that we've had, in particular Article 24. I'm not sure if that's been done purposely or it's just very lucky it's happened that way, but it's great to hear the views of members of the Youth Council on all of this as well. And if you look at this through the lens of Article 24, I think those suggestions that are made in the paper are absolutely where they should be. I was interested in the point on prevention and accessible smoking cessation for pregnant women and wider family members, and wondered if Val could just say a wee bit more about what that currently looks like and what some of the aspirations in that area might be as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie?
So currently we do have a referral service. I think it's actually an opt-out referral from for pregnant women to smoking cessation. So there is support that is available there, and we actually have very high engagement rates. Unfortunately, though, the levels of smoking in pregnancy that we have in Dumfries and Galloway is higher than the Scottish average. But we're actually very good at recording that because there's a focus of it in maternity services. So actually part of what we are doing in terms of it's an opt-out service for people, it means it's really talked about in maternity services, and it's very, very well recorded. So there is really good support there, Marcely, from the NHS services, and we've been involved in helping design other health boards approaches to that. So I think we've got great cessation services, but it does go back to how do we get how do we stop people starting smoking in the first place? How do we create the environments where that isn't a choice that that people make. And some of that work's actually going to have to take place in some of our communities, because unfortunately the smoking rates in areas where we have higher rates of poverty and deprivation, that the rates of smoking there are much higher. Sometimes obviously as a coping mechanism, because actually life is very difficult and very stressful, and it's about how we create our places where there's support within communities and other things where actually that ability to manage and cope with some of the challenges is done in a different way rather than health harming behaviour. So I think in that kind of place planning approach, that's about supportive communities as well, is really important to help with that longer term.
Thanks, Valerie. Thumbs up from Sally. Good. Louise?
Thank you. One of the points I want to bring up is the actual addiction itself to vapes. Do we need to emphasise more what it actually is? Because I think it gets lost that it is an actual addiction between everything else. I think it needs to be brought up. And definitely the point of tobacco was covered up, so why aren't vapes covered up? Because people who buy in vapes don't always have control over the packaging, so just covering them up completely means that the colours aren't shown and all the flavours aren't shown as well. And yeah, just emphasising the dangers of vaping, I think would be beneficial to especially young people. I think young people see a trend and like to follow it, so emphasising the dangers and making sure they know the dangers would be very beneficial as well.
Thanks for that, Louise. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of those things are going to be picked up in the training that's being developed and awareness raising that's being developed. So it might be really good for Abby to come and talk to the Youth Council about some of that's being developed, so that you're aware of it, and actually you can maybe put some input into it as well, because part of that would be about, you know, what an addiction is and how people can be supported with that. So again, very happy to put Abby in touch with you in relation to that. And I think there has been consultation at UK government level in terms of some of the mechanisms about the packaging, the marketing and things as well, and it is committed to in the programme for government, for Scottish Government to really push that legislation forward. And I think what I'm hearing is that actually we want to have some of that advocacy role in saying you need to progress this, and actually what powers do we already have in Scotland under the Tobacco Control Act 2016 that we could be really progressive in relation to this about quickly. Thanks.
Thanks, Valerie. Happy with that? Yeah, good. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, thoroughly support quite a lot of what's been said already. I think the point was made, I think, by Marsali about the obviously the framing of the agenda. So obviously we've got quite a bit there. Article 24 I also picked up on, as well as Article 33, which is protect from harmful drugs, I think, in the convention. And I think if we shouldn't leave any stones unturned. I think there's still a bit of work to do at a UK level in terms of trade and supply internationally of tobacco products. So if you're going to write to anyone in a lobbying capacity, let's write to everybody who can make a difference. I think the UK legislation still sits around the packaging of tobacco products, and there is this bit of a conflation between tobacco and nicotine, because they're two, you can have one and out the other, you know, and that's the issue with the vapes, I think. And then also the UK e-cigarette regulation as well, and obviously that cascades to Scotland also. So I think we have to target accurately where we're going with that. The licensing thing is interesting, because obviously we have an interest as a licensing board for alcohol, but again, tobacco and that is at a UK level, I think, at this time. So I think we need to at least look at that. The other thing is on a health perspective, the nicotine addiction in the womb I'd be interested in, because we talk about tobacco, smoke, households, etc., secondary smoke, and there is a bit in the paper about how tobacco can have a harmful effect on soon-to-be mothers. But it doesn't necessarily go into the nicotine addiction, which is not necessarily related to smoke. but it could be in the product of a vape, if you see what I mean. So it's not the tobacco tar smoke, if you like, from a cigarette. And I just wondered if there's any data on that, because obviously that's the focus in the past has been about secondary smoke in households where somebody's going to have a baby, and that sort of coming into that sort of polluted atmosphere. But if it's nicotine in terms of the drug of addiction, because addiction obviously affects behaviour and is addictive. So I was just wondering if health had anything to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Valerie?
Stephen, I don't know the data in terms of nicotine and the effect of nicotine in pregnancy. Obviously, tobacco smoking in pregnancy is got a huge range of impacts, like low birth weight babies. You know, it really is well documented that it is, you know, really not in the best interests of mother and baby. In terms of vaping and the kind of secondary, there's nicotine which can cause the addiction, but there's a whole ton of other chemicals which are in vapes which are varying in terms of what they are, and it is still an area which there needs to be kind of tighter regulation on. I understand there was a study that was going on, excuse me, in terms of looking at vaping and the impacts, but because this is relatively new, it's very difficult to understand the long-term impacts of that in terms of that kind of second-hand vape. If you see what I mean, but there's a lot of chemicals in those vapes that you wouldn't want to have in your body, you know, particularly you know, in your mouth and inhaling for long periods of time. Because that's the other thing with vapes; they're used very, very frequently for long periods of time. So there's long-term exposure, and unfortunately, the long-term harms of that, as you've rightly said, Lucy. We don't know, and we don't want to wait 50 years before we find out that actually this has been causing, you know, significant damage to people.
Yeah, of course.
So just very quickly on that, and it's back to, I mean, if we really are on the same narrative about the UNCRC and those values that we should be embedding in the way we take decisions and the values that we have in our organisations, when you think about the impact on what we do, that affects young people, and including the voice of young people, and yet we're quite willing to live in a world where we can sell this product easily, readily and colourfully and accessibly without knowing what the consequences are, knowing that it does harm, knowing that it's addictive, knowing that it's designed to be attractive to people who are attracted by colours or whatever you were saying earlier. So I think we really need to push up the way, so punch up the way as well, you know, just to sort of say, listen, if you're serious about care and the harm aspects, then start embedding that before you let products loose in the wild, as it were. So, yeah, just re-emphasising what I've said earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Stuart, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to second, as Lucy had said earlier, on the black boxes for cigarettes in their sale. When it comes to vapes, a lot of their promotion and advertising is significantly different to the way that we see publicly views on cigarettes. Instead of saying, like, quit smoking now, I often see signs which are just saying start vaping now, which is, of course, completely the wrong terminology, especially when they're so brightly coloured and advertised and marketed in a way that's clearly towards children. Beyond that, in regards to the general sale, with them being so openly to see and to get knowledge, and it makes it far more difficult to inhibit the purchase of them, because if you're seeing them in more or less every other shop window, every corner shop, and right in front of you at the counter, whereas cigarettes and sometimes even most alcohols are put to the side behind either a curtain or a box, and mostly out of sight, so you're unsure of whether the police even sells them. I believe that will be a significant improvement over the current situation. Thank you.
Absolutely, Stuart. Good observations. Alan?
Thanks, Chair, and appreciate the input particularly from Youth Council members. I think about the worries we've heard from 10,000 Voices about the suppression and the need for information and more support. And I think those messages have been strengthened today about the real worries there are. Personally, support the model that Australia's taken in recent months, to be fair, to members, which is to decide not to wait for a generation of health harm to be evidence before it decides to do something about it. So in Australia, the move is really that vapes become a smoking cessation product supported by practitioners rather than available in the kind of corner shop model, which I think is particularly helpful. One question that I did follow up, and I'll not repeat some of the points that others have made, which was similar, was around some work through council, and just cheekily through this paper, maybe just to ask for some feedback. The council did fund some work, my understanding was, I think it was through ASH Scotland, through parent councils, which provided some training and support directly for families in terms of how to talk about vapes and vaping with children and young people. I wonder if at some stage maybe council colleagues might give us some feedback on uptake of that programme and how that message was going out would be really helpful. But secondly, just to say I absolutely support the recommendations. I think we've probably heard enough and talked enough about the opportunities. We know some of the barriers through some national legislation that's required, but I do think that where we do have power to take a stand and promote a message, then I would absolutely advocate we make that decision today. Thanks.
Many thanks for that, Alan, absolutely. Ailsa, would you come in?
Yeah, it's just a question for Valerie on the smoking cessation services and the promotion of them. So my question is, during your promotion of them, do you plan to inform younger people about the confidentiality and how they can access the service maybe without telling guardians or parents? Because I feel like they're less likely to want to join a service if they feel like they're going to be in trouble and they're not kept confidential. Anything they say could have been taken to someone else. So yeah, that's just...
Thanks, Ailsa. Valerie?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to raise, because actually, if we're moving, if the services are looking at vaping support, then you are looking at younger children who may be worried about that. So I think that's something that I need to take back to the services and just say, how do we make sure that we are getting that message across about the confidentiality of services and people knowing kind of what the boundaries are around that for different age groups. I think that's something that we need to consider in looking at any of those services. So I'm happy to take that back to Abby as an area that young people maybe are concerned about and feel uncertain. It might be a barrier to them in actually coming forward for some help.
Thank you. Good. I've got Alex online. Morning, Alex. You're on mute.
That's the soundtrack of 2020, isn't it? I do apologise. So thank you very much, Chair. Just listening to some very interesting points across that, and fully support what's been spoken about around promoting the health, the health side of things. But from a housing perspective, it's got me to thinking, and perhaps my fire colleagues will agree, is the safe disposal of these devices. We carry out person-centred fire risk assessments within properties, within our customers' homes, and I think some of what the Youth Council have spoke about is the less legit items, and the safety of these, I think, are very, very concerning. So I think some recommendations to consider the disposal of these devices, because I believe the batteries can be very dangerous. Thanks, Chair.
That's a very good point, and it has an impact across our council services as well, with waste management and the fire safety element of that. And I think that's just coming to light, pardon the pun, in the last year or so, but it's causing problems for us as an authority as well. So I don't have any other members wishing to speak at this point. There's a number of actions, but we'll come to the recommendations in a moment. But there was a question from Alan around Ash and a project or support that was offered through parent councils. We'll maybe need to pick up with that offline and come back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can provide an update to board members once I've got that information, no problem.
Good. So we'll move to the recommendations, and we've discussed and considered the key issues highlighted in the report and the views of our Youth Council. Thank you. And we've to consider and agree to the proposed actions as detailed at section 3.2, and there's quite a number of actions in there, and I think there's a commitment to write to Scottish Government. Will you compile that jointly, and it'll come through me, presumably?
Yes, I'm very happy to work with Stephen and compile a letter that would support the actions in there that could also then, if appropriate, go to other UK government as well. So happy to do that later, Gail.
Yeah, I think given the internal market issues with it, it probably should go to both governments in my view, but yeah, absolutely. And I was to contact COSLA as well. And
well, I absolutely. I think COSLA will have a key role to play, and it might be that it's the health inequalities group that you talked about, or it could be the council leaders. It's a strong voice, and it would be good that everyone's saying the same thing.
Good. So I'll get Stephen to summarise.
Just a very quick one, because I know we had a notice of motion at this council with regard to vapes, and I think batteries were included in that as well in terms of, but I'm just conscious of the last contribution there from Alex. So is there something there is there work already in progress in relation to that in terms of safe disposal and risk in terms of properties? And maybe we could, if there is an update available, we could maybe get that out with this meeting or something like that.
Yeah, thanks. Just in relation to some of the other actions, I'm happy to take them away through community planning and senior leadership team. We can follow them up. But just I wondered in relation to the community planning partnership having a position in terms of retailers and that kind of call to be thoughtful about that. I wonder if it would be helpful to draft something up, and that could maybe be discussed as a position that community planning partners have in relation to some of this, and could be displayed on the website and things as well. So we'd be very happy to work on that and bring that back.
Good, thanks Valerie. You're getting lots of nods around the room. Stephen, did you want to come in?
Yeah, there was also the addition about the role of trading standards in some of the issues, so I'm happy to take that on and have a discussion in terms of what their role can be and the powers they have, and take on board the comments and suggestions that have came forward and the concerns as well. And like Valerie said, I think it's, we can collectively discuss that through the leadership team and get into the detail there.
Good. Okay, so I think we've covered that particular agenda item. I'm very mindful we've been sitting for an hour and 3/4 and it's very cold in here, so we're ahead of time. So if we maybe have a 10-minute comfort break, come back at 12 o'clock, if that's okay. 13 minutes if we're going to be pedantic, but yeah, move around for 13 minutes. Okay, it's gone 12 o'clock and you've all had a walk around and a warm-up. I think we're talking about rights. we're maybe dipping below the minimum temperature for working in. So moving on to item 7, additional support needs, school transitions project, and happy to welcome Kirsty Beattie to present this report.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I just wanted to say, first of all, just thanks very much for inviting me to speak today. So as introduced, I'm Kirsty Beattie. I am an Employability Project Officer and I sit within the Child Poverty team in the Employability and Skills Service. And I'm going to be leading on our pilot Additional Support Needs School Transition project, which is going to encompass whole family support. So this project will look to support young people in school with the additional support needs with their transition from school and onwards, and also their families. So just a little bit of background and sort of how we got to where we are now. So Dumfries and Galloway have identified a portfolio of funding linked to 4 governmental strategies. Those strategies are No One Left Behind, the Parental Employment Support Fund, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and the Local Employability and Skills Partnership Delivery Plan. This funding should resource employability interventions that support disabled adults or adults with additional support needs, disabled parents, or parents of children with disabilities. In 2016, the Scottish Government set out an ambition to halve Scotland's disability employment gap. This is the difference between the proportion of disabled people employed and non-disabled people in employment. With a target to achieve this across Scotland by 2038, and an action plan to support it. Currently, Scotland is ahead of its target, meeting its milestones in 2023. In comparison, Dumfries and Galloway's disability employment gap has increased by 4% since 2016, and at 40.4%, it makes it the lowest performing local authority in Scotland. Part of what we used when we were looking at how this project might move forward was the Rutherford report, which was commissioned by DG LEP, which is our local employability partnership. Dumfries and Galloway's significant disability employment gap is as a result of a number of factors, as well as demographic factors. Other contributory elements include poor transitional support for disabled school leavers, lack of coordinated specialist employability provision, and poor engagement with employers across the region. In line with the findings in the Rutherford report, Dumfries and Galloway will be focused on transitions, employment support, and engaging with employers. The whole family support element of it is, it's estimated that 20.2% of Dumfries and Galloway's economically inactive adults are carers. So these are people who are choosing to withdraw from the labour market in order to look after dependents who are younger, older, disabled, or with a long-term condition. The End Child Poverty Coalition reported 6,751 children living in poverty in Dumfries and Galloway during 21-22, 44% of whom were in working households, indicating that support is required to improve overall household income to parents, carers and guardians who are currently in work. We know that families with a disabled child account for 42% of all children in relative poverty, and 58% of those in combined low income and material deprivation. In 2022, Dumfries and Galloway had the 7th highest proportion of school pupils, that's primary and secondary, that were declared or assessed as having a disability in Scotland at 3.8%. The 2023 Failed and Forgotten report by the Disabled Children's Partnership found that half of parents of disabled children are unable to work and experience poverty as a result of their caring responsibilities, with an estimated 75% of parents having to give up employment. So some of the key issues as we were digging deeper into this. In 2022, The Usual Place organised the second Youth Matters conference, bringing the voices of young people with disabilities to the forefront of discussions about how best to support them. The conference was developed in partnership with the South of Scotland Enterprise, DG Voice, Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, PAMIS, who is Promoting a More Inclusive Society, and NHS Dumfries and Galloway. And this was funded by the Hollywood Trust, the People's Project, Inspiring Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway Council, and Dumfries and Galloway What's Going On. At that conference, more than 110 disabled young people from across our region attended the bridge and discussed accessibility and inclusion for young people with disabilities. The key message from the conference were that the young people emphasised the need to have personalised support in order for them to better participate in their own communities and ensuring their human rights. Following on from that and looking into it a little further, the outcomes that are relevant to the work we want to do to reduce the disability employment gap is there needs to be greater promotion of the potential of disabled young people across our communities. There needs to be greater awareness and promotion of opportunities for employability and skills development after school, and there needs to be specialist support for young people who are disabled and have mental health issues. So in conclusion, Dumfries and Galloway's support for a successful transition from school for young people are exceptionally limited and is a significant factor that's influencing our disability employment gap. Dumfries and Galloway has a significant number of disabled young people in secondary school, yet no specialist support currently provisioned to help them make a successful transition. It's also worth highlighting that apprenticeships opportunities appear not to be as adequately accessible for disabled young people in Dumfries and Galloway as it is in other parts in Scotland. Young disabled people express frustration about their need for greater support and empowerment and want to be able to participate and be part of the labour market, and yet there's structural barriers that are preventing them from doing so. As part of our service design and looking at how we would move this project forward, we met with young people within our secondary schools across the region. So we had individual discussions arranged with small numbers of young people with identified support needs. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible to do this over a longer period. Some young people weren't attending school and we were time limited, and it didn't allow for us to organise individual home visits. However, the young people consulted were unanimous in the views that any project designed to support their transition from school to a positive destination needed to be designed around their individual needs and aspirations, that activities and opportunities needed to be relevant to the individual, that work-based learning was an important element, and a range of approaches needed to be used that depended on the individual. There's a lack of specialist support for young disabled people in our secondary schools to support a successful transition into employment, as evidenced. This support should come as early in advance of a transition from school as possible, involve specialist staff and involve their families, parents and guardians. Support will enable young people in the senior phase of school to take part in structured activity across S4, 5 and 6 that improves their ambition, confidence and skills for employment. Support should be delivered in partnership with the secondary schools and entail group work, individual support, facilitate work experience, as well as support individuals directly into paid employment. So looking at what our response then is to this finding. So there is a proposal now that's been made and put forward and is currently in action, which is our ASN Schools Transition Project, which does encompass whole family support. Within that, we have 3 key workers. We've got a key worker in the west who will be based in Stranraer Academy, however will have responsibility for the young people in Douglas Ewart, Kirkcudbright, Castle Douglas, Dorrye and Dalbeattie. We have a central key worker who will be based in North West Community Campus, but will have responsibility for St Joseph's, Dumfries High, Dumfries Academy, Wallace Hall and Sankar, and a key worker in the east based in Annan Academy who will have responsibility for Lockerbie, Moffat and Langham. So the number of posts and the distribution is based on the figures that were collated by Andy Majerison, who's within education, and the work that he did with schools. So it's based on the pupils in the school roles at the moment who are assessed and declared as disabled and are currently sitting at red in terms of at risk of leaving without a positive destination. These are the pupils that this pilot is going to focus on supporting. It doesn't replace the current key worker provision that's in schools, so the Employability and Skills Service already has a key worker that sits within the schools and on the employment core group meetings, but it's looking to complement and ensure that young people who require more intensive support are able to have this. So the project's offering to provide direct support to specific young people whose needs are currently beyond the capacity of our current key worker provision. Individual intervention can only start at the point when a young person is 6 months from leaving school, and there'll be a support element that will go 6 months beyond that. At that point, the young people would be supported to continue in their employment journey by another key worker within the provision. So we anticipate this will be a soft handover which will allow the young person to get to know their new key worker. This ongoing key worker service is part of our core offer, so that's the wider delivery team. So schools are obviously a fundamental part of this project. The identified young people will be on the role of a school, and it's a responsibility of the school while they remain on that role to still meet that young person's needs. However, through this project, we're offering to work with people support staff, to developing young workforce coordinators and other partners to identify young people in S4, 5 and 6 who are at significant risk of leaving school without a positive plan or destination. We look to work with each person in S5 or as they become eligible for support and their family to determine a preferred post-school destination and develop a senior phase pathway plan. To work with the young person on a regular basis to facilitate the plan and work through any barriers or challenges as they appear and to facilitate the work-based learning. The key role will be to assist young people to identify outcomes for themselves, to translate these outcomes into an individual plan with a timeline and to facilitate the achievement of these objectives. Each young person within the project will have an individual plan which will focus on their aptitudes and aspirations and outlining what the end point of that plan might be. This will be co-produced with the young person at the heart of it, but will also include parents, carers, guardians, school staff or any other services that are working with and that the young person wants to be included in that plan. Each plan will feature academic attainment objectives, work-based learning and employability skills, a meta-skills evaluation and development, a timeline of achievements with fixed review points, accreditation opportunities, and additional activities on engagement with third-party providers. In terms of the whole family support, so the team will engage parents who are currently unemployed or concerned that they'll have to reduce or stop working once their child leaves education. Activity will focus on delivering one-to-one and group support to parents, coordinating information and support so they can access support for their child. The service will engage and coordinate a wide variety of stakeholders across the region. Will be including social care, housing, welfare support, education, skills and business. It's not intended that these key workers will directly provide this support, but will rather signpost and offer support and guidance to parents to allow them to access and raise awareness of the services that they can access. Our anticipated outcomes. So looking at the people and skills objectives, which ties into the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which this project is part funded by. So we're looking to boost core skills and support adults to progress into work by targeting adults with no or low level qualifications and skills in maths and upskill the working age population, yielding personal and societal economic impact by encouraging innovative approaches to reducing adult learning barriers. We look to support disadvantaged people to access the skills they need to progress in life and into work, for example, long-term unemployed and those with protected characteristics, through funding life and basic skills where this is not delivered through national or local employment and skills provision. We look to reduce the levels of economic inactivity and move those furthest away from the labour market closer to employment through investment and bespoke support, employment support tailored to meet local needs. Investment should facilitate the join up of mainstream provision and local services within an area for participants through the use of one-to-one key worker support, improving employment outcomes for specific cohorts who face labour market barriers. These are our targets as they sit at the moment, but it's important to highlight that this is our targets up to March 25. So our project is funded by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund up until that point. Beyond that, we have match funded within the Employability and Skills Service to allow this pilot project to continue to December 2025. The important part of that is we are going to have an ongoing evaluation of this project right from the outset, because we want to be able to provide strong evidence that there's a need for this to be a continued offer to the schools and to our young people within the schools. I've looked to link this project to the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan. So under Theme 1 being health and wellbeing, under reduced health inequalities in the areas of our region which experience the greatest negative impacts, we would, whilst working with our partners, the focus will be on ensuring workplaces are inclusive Signposting to appropriate services will ensure the young people and families we work with are empowered and supported to access the support that they need. Under improve the health and wellbeing of our citizens through targeted approaches, our plan would be through intensive support, people will feel valued and grow in confidence, allowing them to access and enjoy opportunities previously difficult to reach, improving both their mental and physical health. Under work together as partners to eliminate child poverty, working with this identified group will raise family aspiration, giving people more opportunity to move into sustained paid employment and increasing household income. On the local outcomes improvement plan under theme 2 work, so under grow and maximise the potential of the working age population to help increase employability, this project seeks to support a positive progression for our disabled young people leaving school into positive and sustainable outcomes, whilst approaching this with a whole family support angle, with parents also supported and signposted in their own employment journey. Under address the skills and recruitment gaps in key sector-specific posts to increase capacity, capabilities and ease workforce pressures. We will look to support aspiration within the whole family, whilst looking at the local labour market and skills gaps, ensuring people of all ages are given the skills and confidence to progress. Under increased volunteering opportunities to help develop skills, build capacity and support progression into local employability, we will work with our employers and partners and the project will look to increase the volunteering opportunities available, increase awareness of the importance of these opportunities and underpin the benefit to this in supporting people to move in employment. Work with our local communities to develop an inclusive, thriving economy and to promote fair work. This project aims to work with employers to understand the needs of people with additional support needs and the skills they bring to the workplace, increasing understanding of reasonable adjustments and to promote fair work with everyone that we work with. And I'm happy to open the floor up to questions.
Many thanks for that, Kirsty, and thank you for both the report and quite a stark presentation. Clearly there's been a gap in this provision, so very much welcome the approach of the transition project and all the work that you've done to get it to here. Very happy, open to members. Oh, I've got Marsali online and then Valerie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation and the paper. They are pretty stark, as I think, Gail, you just said. So in amongst all of our financial challenges individually as organisations, I think it's been quite thought-provoking in terms of our responsibilities as individual organisations to do something in this space. And I was thinking about how we develop access opportunities into working in our public services. I'm aware of an NHS trust over the border which has employed a couple of neurodiverse young people in their freedom of information and access to records teams, and they are the first people in 3 generations to be working, and the impact on their family, on themselves, has been nothing short of transformational. So I think we probably need to think about what we offer as a public sector in this space as well in terms of opportunities. I was also really thoughtful about your targets, Kirsty, and is there something there about the impact this has on lifting families out of poverty? Is that a measure that we could have, particularly given the parent measure that you identified to maintain or progress employment for 32 parents? It just feels like we could broaden our view on actually the impact that might have on whole families and lifting them out of poverty. Thank you.
So that's certainly something that we will be doing. That outcomes and outputs that I shared was part of our proposal to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but within the child poverty team we're really keen to constantly be capturing that evidence of the work we do and helping to lift families out. So absolutely that will be embedded in part of what we're doing. Yeah. And I would be delighted to have a conversation with the NHS about how we can look at the workforce and how we could work together on that. I'd be delighted to do that.
Are you happy with that, Marsali?
Yeah, I think it would be useful to have that conversation, and I can take that back to our Director of Workforce to see what might be possible there. I think I'd encourage other organisations to think about that as well, because we've all got, I think, a responsibility in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really helpful presentation and aligns so well with the outcomes for the local outcome improvement plans. It's really great to see this, and as Marcely said, it's how we can all play a part in this, because it's such a stark gap, and will have lifelong impacts for families. And I just wondered, in terms of it's great having those really stark metrics, but is there maybe an opportunity as well to hear some of the stories from the families? I know you obviously have to watch anonymity, but I think actually there'll be lots of unintended impacts that the figures will hide, and I think that might also give a real richness to the wider impacts that this project might have as well. Thanks, Gail.
So that's certainly something the evaluation is going to look at. So it'll be talking to the young people and the families and the schools about how it works. But for me, it's people's real life stories that have the most amount of impact. So I'm really keen to capture that. I think one of the recommendations is that we would come back and be able to give further updates on that. And I would love to be able to do that down the line and be able to share some of the stories and positive improvements that this has made.
Thanks, Kirsty. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Just prompted by a comment that Valerie made. 2 points for me around Dumfries and Galloway tends to have quite a positive, certainly in terms of reporting, positive rates of positive destinations post-school, which is up and has a trend for a long time. I'm curious about the numbers now. This report paints a slightly different picture, and actually what does that actually look like, and how will we measure the longer term impact around where young people go after school? My second question is about our readiness of schools. I guess a programme like this can't just be implanted from tomorrow and switched on and expect a level of engagement. So just curious about what you're doing with schools to get colleagues in schools ready to support young people too.
So I don't have a massive understanding of the drop-off, but I know there is some work being done about sustaining positive destinations. So I think there's a lot of work, and young people will move into a positive destination, but it's about that ongoing support around sustaining that. And certainly employability and skills has a part in it, but there's other partners who we work with. And I think the figures are generally held by Skills Development Scotland, but we certainly have a number of people that we're working with that we're able to monitor in terms of sustainability. But if we were working with a young person, so this is in our core model of our delivery team, once a person moves into a positive destination, we continue to offer support for 12 months. So this isn't the ASN team, but this is our general key worker service. And if that young person didn't sustain that outcome, we would then put that support back in to progress them into another outcome. So the numbers may be that they're coming from people that are not sitting within employability and skills. And with regard to school, absolutely, because the schools are absolutely key. However, they are really, really keen to have us. There has been education are very pleased that this project is being offered and are more than welcome to accept us in. Because we already have quite a strong relationship with the schools in terms of the employment core group meetings, and because we already work quite closely with generally people support. So our delivery team at the moment will be supporting these young people. So we, in the Employability and Skills Service, will have referrals from the school, and it will generally be any of our young people leaving school that are sitting at Red. That's where those young people will come at the moment. This is about, and this is why it's a complement to, this is about acknowledging that some young people will need that intensive support, and we want to be able to provide that, because it's that long-term work being done now that will not only support that young person, but also change the outlook for that family as well.
Thank you for that, Kirsty. John?
Thanks very much, Kirsty. Thanks for your report, your presentation. Early on, you mentioned a startling number of identified parents as carers. And I'm just wondering, obviously we're very focused on the young person and their transition, but I wondered what work you and your team are doing if parents are being identified as carers. Are they then being supported to look at support through other commission services about making sure that their health and well-being are being looked after, and that whole family approach?
Absolutely. So that is the main focus of it. So it's about looking at that whole family and how the way to move a family forward is together. And if we are working with families, building relationships, and there's identified support needs, then we will be signposting and supporting, but not just there's a service over there that can help, but have you got IT access? Are you able to do that? Let's sit down and do that referral. So it isn't just about saying to somebody, there's that service over there. It's about seeing that through and then making sure they're receiving that support. But ultimately, the key workers wouldn't be supporting the family, but they'll be making sure that whatever support that parents, guardians or carers need, that we would be ensuring that that need was met.
Thank you, Kirsty. I've got Fiona online.
Thanks, Kirsty. It's a super presentation, and it was really just to say that I'd love to get in touch with you out of this meeting, just to tie in where this will sit within the Children's Services Plan subgroup for disabled children with complex care needs, because transitions throughout the life course of a disabled child is one of the priorities of that plan too. And I know that we're working closely with Andy Margerison already on the aspect which is that kind of older child to their beyond into education, training, volunteering, etc. So I'll be in touch and see if we can tie these things together.
I absolutely welcome that. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And for those that aren't online, Julie's put in the chat that she'd be delighted to be involved in that conversation, re-pathways into the NHS as well. So that's feedback from Julie. Any other members? No? All happy? Well, thank you again for the presentation and the report. And I hope the project goes really, really well. So we've been asked to note the strong links to the project outcomes and the LOIP outcomes, which we've done. Consider the views of members and Youth Council and agree to receive progress updates on the project through 6 monthly local employability partnership updates to CPPB. Okay? Good. Thank you, Kirsty. So moving on to item 8, which is updates on key plans and strategies. Slightly different way of doing things now. So I'll pass to Stephen to highlight key points that lead officers are looking for comment on, and then we'll take additional comments and observations. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, so the next 2 items are business items, and we were conscious that the previous items today were the main discussion parts. So there's a lot of information in here just for noting or taking on board. So I'll just highlight some of the areas which we're maybe looking for some input on. So firstly, on the Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan, it's been highlighted by the partnership that they are looking for funding options to help support their activities, and particularly around lived and living experience and family support. So I was thinking maybe, Alan, some of the funding streams that the third sector might have available, that might be worth a conversation if the eligibility criteria was met, perhaps. So that's one thing. The independent review of CLD, the national review, recommendations are now available, and those are attached to Appendix 3 for interest. We also have an update on the local development plan, and there was consultation sessions which took place early summer, and we'll be getting regular updates on the LDP over the coming board meetings. But just to bring your attention to Appendix 4, that it's a requirement to develop a schedule around community wealth building, which is again one of the LOIP Action Plan projects. So there's some draft text narrative in there, and again, if anyone has any thoughts or suggestions on that, they can raise it now, or they can contact myself after the meeting, and I can liaise with the lead officer on that. The local housing strategy, there is a meeting of key stakeholders taking place on the 30th of September. I think it's actually in this room, but it's a hybrid meeting. And the lead officers highlighted that members of the CBB would be welcome to attend that if you're able. So if you want to, you can let me know today or let me know after the meeting, and I can give you the joining details for that meeting, and that's to develop the Housing Emergency Action Plan. So input would be really, really appreciated into that. So that's the main issues for highlighting. Thank you.
That's great. So we'll just go down through them in turn, and members can pick up any points they wish to. So, Children's Services Plan, do members have any comments or queries? No. Dumfries and Galloway Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan, again comments or queries? No. CLD Partner Strategic Plan 2021 to 2024. All happy with that. Local Development Plan 2. Valerie.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose it's just to emphasise how important that local development plan is in terms of setting, you know, the parameters for how we have places and an environment that supports our kind of health and well-being. I just had a wee quick chat with Rob offline, because I know that my colleague David Rowland had been having some conversations about what are the opportunities in terms of the kind of social care market for kind of that community wealth building social enterprise, and it just, I know it's like the local development plan, but it's maybe just worth checking out with maybe David and Shona if it might be important to put that into that kind of evidence schedule as well. So happy to pick up offline with Rob and Shona in relation to that, and connect in with David, because that might be something that might be useful to put in.
Rob's nodding, so and we'll feed that back to Shona as well. Yeah, good. Thanks, Valerie. Local housing strategy, any comment? No. Regional transport strategy, comment or query? You're going to get off lightly. Go on then, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I noticed your gaze, Chair. Yeah. I suppose the only comment I could make on that is, at this moment in time, is as Chair, I received a letter from the Minister about, you know, the programme for government, which has an effect on transport. In particular, I think it's more to do with the active travel part of it, where Tier 1 funding is okay at this moment in time. However, Tier 2 funding and where we progress from that, at this moment in time, we don't really know, because we're just waiting for the budget to come out. So it's kind of watch this space at the moment, but it will have an effect on active travel and sustainable travel, I suppose. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, and we'll feed that back to Grant Coulthart as well. Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, so the recommendations, we've to note the summary updates highlighted at para 3.2 and consider and agree to the request made by lead officers. Are we happy to do that? Yeah, nods all round. Note the progress being made in relation to the key strategies and plans that support the LOIP as detailed in Appendix 1, and we've provided comment and feedback to lead officers. That's great, thank you very much. Valerie?
Sorry, thanks. I suppose I just want to ask the board if this format is helpful, because we have changed the format and we've reduced the number of reports, because I have had some feedback that actually the lead officers would really welcome questions and challenging feedback from the Community Planning Partnership Board. So I know there's a lot of papers and a lot of volume here, but you know, if there's any other way that it could be presented that would help members do that, or give more constructive feedback or challenge, I think they would really welcome that. So anything that you want the Community Planning Senior Leadership Team to consider as to how we can support that, we're happy to look at it. So any feedback's very welcome.
Thanks, Valerie. Dawn?
And thank you for that, Valerie. I'll just say I'd like to be able to connect with you outside of here in terms of how we might take that forward, because I've got some thoughts. Okay.
Great, thank you. And obviously anybody else can feedback through Stephen if required. Good, thank you. So item 9, business brief, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. So a few things for really consideration or endorsement here. The first one is there's work going on nationally for a community planning self-evaluation tool for partners to participate in and see where they are. So I think it would be a good development tool, and the leadership team considered that at the last meeting. So it's really just asking for board endorsement just to ensure we're involved in that work. The other two things, and Valerie might want to say a few words on the latter two. So there's an opportunity to participate in a national programme, which is the Health Equity in Scotland, and it seems like a really good opportunity. And also, just hot off the press, there's a new population health framework which is being developed, and some consultation work ongoing. And again, keen to receive any comments about that. But similar to earlier, the leadership team will prepare a response against that and run it past yourself, Chair. But maybe Valerie would like to say a few words on the health-related issues.
Thanks, Chair. So just in relation to the collaboration for health equity in Scotland, this is a collaboration between Public Health Scotland and the Institute of Health Equity, which is based in England and has worked with a number of areas, and they've become what's called kind of marmot towns or marmot cities, based on the framework for Sir Michael Marmot of what we need to do to tackle the kind of determinants of health and increase population health and health equity. And so there's a proposal for an invite for 3 areas to come forward to be involved in this collaboration, to actually see how can we work differently? What are the barriers that we have in the way to actually really make a difference in terms of health equity? And we had quite a good conversation about this at our community planning senior leadership team. And I think we all recognise the complexity of what we're trying to do, the complexity of our structures that we have. And I think we're making really good inroads in Dumfries and Galloway to kind of new ways of working and new opportunities, but it's a very, very complex area to make real inroads and difference in, and because the outcomes are so long term, it can sometimes be really difficult to take focus. So we actually did think, well, actually, what would the harm be in getting, Public Health Scotland and Health Equity Institute involved to work with us to see, well, are we, on the right direction? Could we do things differently? Could we make, concentrate on smaller things and have, greater focus? So the kind of proposal was that we were keen to be put forward as an area for this. It does involve completion of a self-assessment document, which Community Planning Senior Leadership Team be happy to pull together for it. It does need approval from both Dawn and Julie if we're to go forward with this. I had a conversation earlier this week with somebody from the Institute of Health Equity, because as you'll see within the papers, it does ask for resource. What resource can you put into this? And we described the resources that we've kind of already got aligned to community planning and the partnerships that we've already got, like the local employability partnership. And I think Stephen and I, we were both kind of quite reassured that actually through the way we work, we actually have resource there that we could tap into. It would require a bit of input from Stephen and myself, the community planning senior leadership team, and some conversations perhaps with the board level as well. But it really is in that kind of improvement journey kind of approach. And I think as well, they really want to understand the barriers that community planning partnerships have in taking forward joint pieces of work, and in these really difficult resource constrained times, I think it would be a really valuable opportunity. So the proposal is if partners around the table are supportive of that, and Dawn and Julie may wish to come in, that senior leadership team, we'd pull together the proposal and submit to Julie and Dawn for sign-off, because it has to be in for the 23rd of September, so there's not a terribly much time for that, but that's the proposal for that one, and I can come back in on the population health strategy once we've talked about that, maybe. Gail, thanks.
Dawn?
Thank you, Valerie. And we've had a number of kind of conversations over time around this, and we've both, I think, been curious about what it would actually deliver and what impact it would have, and whether it's something that we should pursue. But I'm supportive of expressing an interest and progressing in the way that you've described. If it is going to enable us to really understand some of those challenges and the blockages and what we, you know, what's within our gift to really really move on and make a difference around. I am conscious that it will take time to develop a self-assessment, but that in itself is a valuable process so that we can, you know, take account ourselves of, you know, of where we are and, you know, what the opportunities might be. So I'm supportive of progressing with an expression of interest. I'll be curious to see what real benefit this will bring, but there's the offer of external support and advice that, you know, we should always be open to, and you know, I look forward to hearing more should our interest be progressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. I've got Julie online.
Thanks, Gail, and thanks, Valerie, for the presentation there. I suppose I just wanted to sort of formally endorse this, I think, Gail, in terms of a way forward. Like Dawn, we've been thoughtful about, from my point of view, it was primarily around the capacity that this might take from our teams, and really being clear about, if we were going to be dedicating capacity to this, that we could envisage that we would reap some benefits from it. And as Dawn said, I do think in D&G we should be very open to that sort of external sort of input, and I think having that, you know, external expertise, really giving us some support, some direction, helping us address some of the barriers that we might have in this area, I think could be very helpful. I think we do need to, as a Community Planning Partnership Board, though, continue to be mindful if this becomes, because I think we've all been involved probably in the past with some initiatives where it ends up that that national kind of support isn't maybe as forthcoming as we might want or expect. So I think we just need to keep a very close eye on that. But I think, as Valerie has reassured the board, the expectation is that this would be about working with our existing capacity within the community planning arena, rather than us asking partners at this time of huge kind of financial challenge, etc., to be investing more resource in it. So, as Dawn has said, I would absolutely support this, moving forward to that expression of interest phase, and I think there will be opportunities for us to negotiate with colleagues at a national level around those expectations should we be successful to move forward. So yeah, just want to endorse my support. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Valerie and I have had some conversations around the scope, I suppose, that really sits within community planning rather than within individual organisations. And I think I've also come to the conclusion that actually at this stage it seems it could be more helpful than not. Interestingly, just picking up the comments that from Dawn and Julie about resources, and we've actually been really honest, I think, in the initial draft, that actually addressing some of these significant long-term factors isn't just about service resource, it's actually about a community resource too. So whether that turns into investment on a national basis to help us do it, we've been really clear in the original drafting, I think, of the submission, that to make the scale of change that's needed in the long term does need investment, and where that's available, I think through the programme we would be a bit silly not to take advantage of it. But yeah, I do agree. I think there's a fine line around when this starts becoming work for us with limited benefit other than from national data, for example, that becomes a problem. But at this stage it looks like we'll probably gain more than we necessarily have to give at this stage. But we've been particularly clear, I think, in the initial drafting that this is about a whole community, a whole system impact, rather than just putting pressure on existing public services. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Valerie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just in that initial conversation that I've had, I did highlight the work even to put the self-assessment together, and I said it'd be really, really valuable to get feedback, even if we're not successful, on actually is D&G going on the right direction, and is there anything else that we can do. So that was taken on board. So I'm hopeful that even through putting in the submission, we will at least get feedback if we don't get through to other stages. Thanks.
Good, thanks, Valerie. No other members? So we'll move to the recommendations. We've been asked to endorse our involvement in the National Community Planning Self-Assessment Checklist work as detailed at para 3.1. Note the update on tackling depopulation as detailed in Appendix 1. Note the position statement on the LOIP action plan. Just up with you.
Okay. Sorry, I think Valerie's wanted to just say something about the population.
Oh, right,
if
okay.
that's
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, Valerie.
No problem, Gail. So this is item 3.6 in relation to the population framework, which colleagues in Scottish Government have been working collaboratively to develop over a number of months, really to look at actually how we take a kind of whole system approach to improving population health, because we know that life expectancy in Scotland is unfortunately decreasing. Healthy life expectancy is also decreasing as well, so the length of time people are spending in ill health is increasing, which obviously puts significant pressure on our health and social care services, but also in terms of the likes of, you know, for people to work and to work and earn good incomes, which is so important for health and well-being as well. It's an area we need to get improvements on, and I think really kind of recognition of the challenge that is. So Scottish Government are keen to engage with community planning partnerships, NHS Board and a variety of stakeholders in relation to this framework, and they have provided, and there's a copy in the appendices of actually what they're kind of outlining and the approach that they're taking to this, and it's really kind of focusing on those drivers of population health, so socio-economic factors, places and communities, healthy living and equitable health and care. And we're actually doing quite a lot in a number of these areas in Dumfries and Galloway, but it is always difficult, and it's always difficult in times of crisis as well, and when resources are reduced, to keep that focus on the long term and trying to that prevention agenda. So they are really keen to get feedback on a number of questions which have been outlined in the paper, and a big question about how is this going to be different this time? What is it? How is it about the way that we take this framework forward as a whole system really going to make a difference? So we are going to have a conversation at the Community Planning Senior Leadership team in relation to that, and we'll also have conversations with NHS board colleagues, but really they are really keen for feedback from community planning partnership boards in relation to those questions, in relation to, you know, what actually the way the document's laid out. They talk about each of the areas, and then they've got a small number of kind of high level kind of next steps. Is there anything more that they'd like to see you know, in some of those areas? So very, very happy if colleagues want to give any feedback now, or feedback through Stephen that we can input into our conversations from Community Planning Senior Leadership Team, and Gail, we would look to draft a response and then run it by you, so we can feed that back into Scottish Government if that's okay.
Yeah, there's a number of questions on page 94, so that would be the area that you would want feedback on specifically. So members happy to do that through Valerie? Yeah. Marsali?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the Appendix 1, the depopulation briefing, and just to say that I think this is a really welcome piece of research that's being funded. We know that there's a huge link with housing and availability of that with sustainability of some of our NHS services, for example, for dentists, medics and such like. So I think this work will be really welcome, and obviously if we can use that to support having vibrant communities all year round right across the area, it makes it a really attractive place to live, and hopefully to be able to find somewhere to live. So thank you.
Thanks, Marsali. Valerie?
So just coming back to the depopulation strategy, I think the Community Planning Senior Leadership Team are also really, really keen that there is the people undertaking the research engage with the community planning partners in terms of some of the challenges they're maybe facing in relation to depopulation, so that could kind of be pulled together into it. So I think that was fed back to Andy as well, because I think, as Marcely says, it's getting that the service kind of side perspective of things as well would be really helpful in terms of that research too.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Farah. Just to confirm, so I've been in contact with Andy and I've given him the contact details of lead officers of the leadership team, and he's happy to reach out and have individual chats as part of the work.
Good. No other members? So we'll move back to the recommendations. We've endorsed and noted the first three. Note the update in relation to the use of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Communities in Place Fund as detailed at Appendix 3. Endorse our involvement in the Collaboration for Health Equity in Scotland project as detailed at 3.5. Good. And we've commented on the Population Health Framework as detailed at 3.6.2 and agreed that the CPSLT will coordinate a formal response. That's a tongue twister. Okay, item 10, forward plan. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks. Just briefly, Chair, the last meeting of the year is the 4th of December, so we'll have the end of year report for the LOIP. And there are also 3 other items which were requested by board members earlier in the year in terms of joint workforce issues. It was agreed that there would be an update on housing and the pressures there, and also the role of the Regional Economic Partnership and the work that contributes to the LOIP and the LOIP outcomes. So those will be the kind of meaty discussion items for the last meeting.
Yeah, and I think that that's quite relevant at the moment because the REP's now launched its Strategic Housing Action Plan with 10 very clear targets for the next 2 years. So that will help to feed into that agenda as well. So good, excellent. I have no other business. Nobody else has? Good. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and we'll see you in December. And thanks again to the Youth Council for your contributions. Brilliant. Thank you.